Hi everyone, my name is Diondria Holliman and welcome to my talk today on business continuity and disaster recovery planning. I am a cybersecurity professional and educator with over 15 plus years experience across multiple IT roles, from coding to project portfolio management at major corporations. I hold several premium industry certifications, namely the CISSP, the PFMP, and the PMP. Most recently, I am the proud recipient of the 2021 ISC Squared Global Achievement Mid-Career Professional Award for the Americas, representing advancements in this space. Teaching and mentoring on security topics has always been a huge passion of mine because in times of crisis, we need to be fully prepared and not reactive to keep our businesses running. Furthermore, business continuity and disaster recovery planning are the most crucial elements of a business, and yet they're often ignored. Data is the lifeblood of your business. If you were to lose access to it, it's corrupted, lost, stolen, or even held in ransom, how long could you survive without it? Now that you know a little bit about me, let's jump right into it so that you know exactly how to answer that question and you feel fully prepared this time. It's not hard to be ready. In fact, the only thing harder than planning for a disaster is explaining why you did not. What you will learn from this talk is how to distinguish between disaster recovery and business continuity, the fundamentals for developing an effective plan and training your staff on its use, and various ways to conduct testing to ensure your plans actually work. That's important. This talk is based on more in-depth course offering that I teach at Udemy platform on how to write, test, and maintain an effective business continuity plan using a case study so that you can apply those skills to the real world. It's a perfect start to revise or develop strong plans based on today's changing priorities. And even if you have a plan in place, it's time to rewrite your playbook to fit today's current risk environment. So if you're ready to hear more, join me on starting this journey together. First and foremost, let's review some key terms. Business continuity. It represents the actions, processes, and tools for ensuring an organization can continue critical operations after a disaster occurs. It is an umbrella term, however, that includes many other plans, one of which we will discuss next. A subset of business continuity includes disaster recovery. It represents all of the tasks and activities required to bring an organization back to normal operations following a disaster. Simply put, a disaster is a sudden, unplanned event that brings great loss or damage. Often these two plans are referred to jointly as BCDR, which I will reference throughout this talk. When you hear the term business continuity, think long-term focus. Disaster recovery, think short-term focus. Business continuity involves keeping the business processes operational by any means necessary, using pen and paper if it calls for it. There are a couple of things to keep in mind about the combined importance of BCDR. First, continuing to operate after a disruptive event means controlling chaos and providing clear direction on how you will continue to produce your product or service. Second, continuing to make money. Third, retaining customer confidence by protecting your reputation and brand. Fourth, returning value to your shareholders and investors. Being prepared ahead of time creates organizational resilience, and it can literally make the difference between surviving an incident or becoming an unfortunate statistic. Next, let's map cybersecurity and BCDR so that it can be ingrained in the DNA of an organization's culture. Often people are disconnected with the two. Our risk factors are consistently moving targets. How? Let's look at a few of the things that have changed in our environment post the pandemic. Number one, we have the sudden and hasty move to the cloud. We are now mostly supporting hybrid environments. Two, working from home has led to sensitive data being shared on personal devices. Three, normal commissioning and decommissioning procedures simply are not being followed. I'm not telling if you're still holding on to that old laptop like me. Four, recovery time objectives, RTO, something we'll discuss shortly, is very different and challenged. And five, triage and retrospectives or lessons learned efforts, they're hampered in this virtual environment. What that translates to is that we are seeing more and more cyber-related attacks affecting day-to-day operations, and it's no longer isolated to finance and healthcare industries. Clearly, if you're watching the news headlines, ransomware attacks are taking total advantage of these vulnerabilities. Hence, BCDR and cybersecurity are interrelated. The terms of the CIA triad supporting the three key pillars of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Business continuity addresses primarily the information security goal of availability to keep our systems and data running. There are 6 key phases of business continuity management. And think of it in terms of a project almost. There's project initiation, defining things like scope, schedule, and budget. The ultimate outcome here is to obtain senior leadership approval and commitment. Next, we have business impact analysis, determining what are the critical business functions and processes, along with the resource requirements necessary to sustain operations. Recovery strategy. How are you going to back up data based on those priorities? And finally, I'll bundle writing, testing, and maintaining those plans at the bottom. In lieu of time, today's talk will cover what is arguably the most important 2 phases in the entire process. Business impact analysis, which is used to determine the recovery priorities, and testing to ensure those plans actually work. Business impact analysis focuses on criticality. The team creating the BIA, as it's referred to, will need to look at the organization from many different angles and use information from a variety of sources. Let's review at a high level some of those considerations. It's important to understand the chain of consequences to identify upstream and downstream impacts. For example, let's just say we have a few threat agents out there, maybe a hacker or a bot herder, and they launch an attack using certain vehicles, such as email attachments, USB drive, or maybe even a software backdoor, to exploit specific vulnerabilities. Perhaps if they're internal or external, they become aware of an unpatched server, weak passwords, or discover a control allows unauthorized access, which in turn bypasses those preventive security controls we have in place and is able to impact an entire function. For example, payroll, causing an outage where no one gets paid. It may appear to be only one level deep initially, but it may have other impacts we aren't aware of. Hence, without seeing the bigger picture, we could risk rating the impact of that specific vulnerability as low, and as a result, not devote enough resources to mitigate that threat. However, I am pretty sure that if you didn't get paid, that would become an urgent issue for the organization to resolve. The golden rule here is that risk assessment should be aggregated and rated similar to the matrix that you see here on the screen. On the vertical axis, you can see the likelihood rating. What's the chance of something happening? And on the horizontal axis, you see the consequences of the rating. What is the significance if that thing actually does happen? When planning, you go through your infrastructure, your networking, your HVAC system, and all of your assets, finding those sweet spots to mitigate risks that fall in the high or the extreme, the yellow or the red categories, that are likely to happen, and if they do, they will result in catastrophic impact, so that we can make sure we have adequate protection. Let's take a look at an actual disaster recovery timeline to review a few more key terms. We're moving along. Regular day-to-day operations. Everything's good. Then suddenly, we have a crisis. Looking at the bottom of the screen, fortunately, your organization predetermined that it is only willing to lose up to 8 hours of data, which is your RPO recovery point objective, and hence backups to the cloud are scheduled accordingly. Phew, almost, right? During that time that it will take to recover from this disaster, many key decisions will need to be made quickly by your leadership, along with clear lines of communications on various platforms to your employees, partners, customers, shareholders, and so forth. There are certain drivers, such as what you see at the bottom, the maximum tolerable downtime, your MTD, which represents the max downtime or outage before irreparable damage, meaning your business can no longer recover. In this example, let's just say it's 1 week. The other key factor here is RTO, Recovery Time Objective, appearing here in purple. And it represents the amount of time that's acceptable to get your operations back up and running. Hypothetically, let's just say that's 3 days. The last factor here I'll review is WRT, Work Time Recovery. That's in orange, and it represents the max time it takes to recover data to the recovered systems. And perhaps it's a half day's effort. In my course offering I reference, I go into great detail using an actual case study. But for now, let's just assume we execute our plans based on the potential impacts of the business in order to quickly return back to normal operations. In order for that ideal situation to work, we must complete testing. There are 5 key testing types associated with BCDR. The first one is checklist. Individuals of a team receive a copy of the plan and they review it individually to provide feedback. Walkthrough. Members gather together and role play a disaster situation in the same room preferably. Simulation. You're testing small scenarios here. Your organization tests that individual scenario to determine the recovery time for a given component. Parallel. Your operations is performed simultaneously at a primary facility and the standby facility. But the difference here is that the primary facility is still operational. And last, full interruption, where operations are fully transferred to the standby facility. The original site, in this case, is shut down. To summarize testing, you will need to understand that each one of these testing types are associated with increasing costs, the amount of time to prepare, and overall complexity in the order at which I reviewed them. The resulting plans are living documents, meaning it's an ongoing process, not a project with a beginning and end. It's an opportunity to constantly improve. Why is that necessary? Your threats obviously continue to evolve. New technology gets adopted and old ones are retired. So the goal is long-term awareness, increased readiness, and continuous improvement. We need to develop methods to obtain feedback, metrics, and KPIs to measure the effectiveness. The idea here is to refine those plans over time, act on the feedback, and ultimately fix what doesn't work. The main takeaway here is to constantly improve, because that's the win-win that can mean the difference between saving human lives as well as saving the longevity or life of your organization. Having an up-to-date BCDR plan demonstrates that your organization has the full competency of skills, knowledge, and ability to thrive, and also the due diligence, which is important to your insurers, partners, shareholders, and so forth. It helps ensure the highest probability of successful recovery efforts. It also prepares your organization for audit approvals, both internal and external. In some cases where it's required, it prepares your organization for various industry-level certifications. For example, the ISO 27001 for cybersecurity or the ISO 22301 for business continuity. My biggest takeaway that I hope to leave with you is that BCDR plays a critical role in an organization's sustainability in this competitive world. As mentioned earlier, this talk is a high-level review of what I cover more in depth on the Udemy platform. If you're interested in learning more, and I hope you are, follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn for promotional codes and details on when this material will be released. As for now, it has been an absolute pleasure to share with you today, and I thank you for taking the time to listen. Are there any questions?